All right, loves, should we read the story? We're reading Grimm Tales, and today's story is Briar Rose. Yeah, me too. Once there were a king and queen who said to each other every day, "Wouldn't it be good to have a child?" But for all their wishing, all their praying, all their expensive medicine and special diets, no child came. Then one day when the queen was bathing, a frog crept out of the water and sat on the bank, and said to her, "Your wish will be granted." Apparently it crept out of the water and into my throat. Sorry about that. "Before a year has passed, you'll bring a daughter into the world." The frog's words came true. After a year the queen gave birth to a baby girl who was so beautiful that the king couldn't contain his joy, and he ordered a great celebration to which he invited not only his royal relatives from every nearby country, but also friends and distinguished people of every kind. Expensive medicine and special diets, as you do when you're trying to have babies. Some people really do that when they're trying to have babies. Among those were the 13 wise women. The king wanted them there so that they'd be well disposed towards his daughter, but the trouble was that he had only 12 gold plates for them to eat off. One of the wise women would have to stay at home. The feasting and celebrating went on for some time, and it ended with the wise woman presenting the new princess with special gifts. This one gave her virtue, this one gave her beauty, a third gave her wealth, and so on. Everything anyone could wish for was hers. The 11th one had just given her gift, patience, when there was a disturbance at the door. The guards were trying to keep someone out, but she swept them aside and came in anyway. It was the 13th wise woman. "So you didn't think me worth inviting," she said to the king. "What a mistake that was! Here's my answer to that insult. In her 15th year the princess will prick her finger on a spindle and fall down dead." Hey, Sparrow. You know, I didn't have this cough until I started reading, and now it won't leave me alone. Sorry. I apologize. And she turned on her heel and swept out. This has always bothered me, because why the hell did he just not buy another gold plate? Like, he's a king, right? He should be able to afford another gold plate, and then all of this could have been avoided. I'm just saying. Everyone was shocked. But the 12th wise woman, who hadn't given her gift yet, stepped forward and said, "I can't completely undo that evil wish, but I can soften it. The princess will not die, but fall asleep for 100 years." The king, wanting to protect his daughter, issued a command that every spindle in the land should be burned. As the princess grew up, it was clear that all the wise woman's gifts were there in full abundance. Never had anyone known a girl kinder, more beautiful, more clever, or more sweet-tempered. She was loved by everyone who knew her. Now on the day when the princess turned 15, it happened that the king and the queen were away, and the girl was alone in the castle. Again, dude, you know about this curse. Why the fuck would you go and leave your child alone on the very day that the curse is supposed to come true? What the hell is happening in your brain? This is bad parenting. Also, I have so many opinions on this story. Sorry, you're going to get a lot of nerdery in this one. But also, there is a lesson here about just frickin' telling your children about the danger, right? Because if they had gotten her used to spindles and told her about the curse, then she could have avoided it on her 15th birthday. But no, they burn them all so that when she encounters one, she's super curious about it. Bad parenting. Anyway. Where's that soapbox counter? Wanting to catch the story on my way to work. Sorry. It's still not working for you. That sucks. Sorry about that, Sky Nerd. Okay, let's get back to it. Now, on the day when the princess turned 15, it happened that the king and the queen were away, because they're bad parents, and the girl was alone in the castle. She wandered about from one place to the next, looking into this room or that, into the cellar, up onto the rooftop, going wherever she wanted, and at last she came to an old tower where she'd never been before. She climbed up the dusty spiral staircase and found a small door at the top with a rusty key in the lock. Curious, the princess turned the key, and at once the door sprang open. In the little room sat an old woman with a spindle, busily spinning flax. "Good morning, old lady," said the princess. "What's that you're doing?" "I'm spinning," said the old woman. Of course the princess had never seen anyone spinning before. "What's that little thing bouncing around at the end of the thread?" she said. The old woman offered to show her how to do it. The princess took hold of the spindle, and a second later she felt a prick in her finger, and down she fell on the bed that lay ready, fast asleep. The bed that lay ready. You see what's happening here? Yeah, no, common sense is not a thing in fairy tales. The sleep was so deep that it spread through all the castle. The king and queen had just returned, and as soon as they walked into the hall they fell down where they stood. Their servants and attendants fell down too, like dominoes in a line, and so did the horses in the stables and the grooms looking after them, and the pigeons on the roof and the dogs in the courtyard. One dog was scratching himself. He fell asleep just like that, with his back paw behind his ear. The flies on the wall fell asleep. Down in the kitchen the very flames under the roasting ox fell asleep. A drop of fat that was about to fall from the sizzling carcass stayed where it was, and didn't move. The cook had been about to clout the kitchen boy. Her hand fell still 6 inches from his ear, and his face remained screwed up waiting for the blow. Outside the wind stopped blowing. Not a leaf stirred. The very ripples on the lake stayed as they were, as if made of glass. In all the castle and its grounds the only thing that moved was a thorny hedge. Every year it grew a little more, and it slowly grew and grew till it reached the castle walls, and then it climbed and climbed year by year till it covered the entire castle. Nothing of the building could be seen, not even the flag on the roof. Of course people wondered why this was happening, and where the king and queen and their beautiful daughter were, but there were a few people who'd been guests at the celebration of the princess's birth, and who remembered the wise woman and their gifts, and the curse of the one who'd been left out. "It's all because the beautiful princess fell asleep," they said. "She must be in there still. Anyone who makes his way in and rescues her will marry her. You'll see." Naturally, as time passed, various young men came, princes, soldiers, farmers' sons, beggars, all kinds of them, trying to cut their way in through the hedge and find the door of the castle. They were sure that once they were inside, they'd find the princess and wake her up with a kiss and break the spell. But none of them managed it. The hedge was immensely thick, and the thorns so long and sharp that they dug into the clothes and the flesh of anyone trying to force his way through. All the young men got stuck. The more they struggled, the deeper the thorns stabbed them, and they couldn't go on, and they couldn't turn back, and they couldn't get free, and they all died helplessly in the hedge. Many, many years later, after the story of the sleeping princess had been almost forgotten, a young prince came to that country. He was travelling incognito, and when he stayed at a humble inn not far from the castle, nobody knew who he was. One night he listened to an old man telling a story by the fire. It was a story about the great thorn hedge. Inside the hedge there was a castle, and inside the castle was a tower, and inside the tower was a room where a lovely princess lay asleep. "And there's many a brave young man has tried to get through the hedge," he said, "but not one of them made it. If you go up close you can see their skeletons, or bits of 'em that's close enough to see, but no one's seen the princess, and she's lying there asleep to this day." "I'll try," said the young man. My sword's sharp enough to deal with thorns." "Don't do it, son," said the old man. "Once you get in that hedge, no power on earth will get you out. You'll blunt your sword on 100 thorns before you've gone a yard." "No," declared the prince. "I'm going to do it, and that's that. I'll start in the morning." As it happened, the very next day was the day when the 100 years were up. Of course the prince didn't know about that, but he set off with a heart full of courage. This is another thing that pisses me off about the story. It's just pure luck that the prince who gets through happens to be there on the right day. Like, what the fuck? Surely it should be because he is noble and pure of heart and courageous and kind. But no, he's just punctual. And not even punctual because he didn't know. He just did it by luckiness. Anyway, he came to the great thorn hedge and found it not at all as the old man had said, because, as well as thorns, the hedge was bearing pretty pink flowers, thousands upon thousands of them. For all that, though, he could see the skeletons of many other young men tangled deep in the briars. A sweet fragrance like apples filled the air, and as the prince came close to the hedge the branches pulled apart by themselves to let him through, closing up behind him afterwards. He came to the courtyard and saw the pigeons asleep, the dog still with its paw behind its neck, the flies asleep on the wall. He went down into the kitchen and saw the kitchen boy's face still screwed up waiting for the clout from the cook's hand, the flames standing quite still in the hearth, the drop of fat still about to drop from the roasting ox. He wandered through the rooms upstairs and saw servant after servant asleep in the middle of whatever they'd been doing, and the king and the queen asleep on the floor of the hall, exactly where they'd fallen. Then he came to the tower. He climbed the dusty spiral staircase. He found the little door. He turned the rusty handle. The door opened at once. There on the bed lay the most beautiful princess the young man had ever seen, or could ever imagine. He bent over her and kissed her lips, and Briar Rose opened her eyes and gave a little sigh of surprise, and smiled at the young man, who fell in love with her at once, as you do. They went downstairs together, watching everyone wake up all around them. The king and the queen woke up, and stared all around wide-eyed because of the great hedge that had grown all over the castle. The horses woke up and shook themselves and neighed. The pigeons on the roof woke up. The dog in the courtyard carried on scratching. The cook boxed the kitchen boy's ears so hard that he yelled. The drop of fat fell into the fire with a sizzle. And in due course the prince was married to Briar Rose. The wedding was celebrated with great splendour, and they lived happily together to the end of their lives. The end.